Out of the Ordinary Insights, brought to you by Investec Specialist Bank.
Michael Mack has been the Chief Executive Officer of Syngenta since January 2008. Syngenta is the world's largest agribusiness company and is one of the first publicly quoted companies in the sector. Bronwyn Nielsen caught up with Michael on this week's Captains of Industry.
Let's talk about your Africa aspirations as Syngenta. I believe you are investing some $500 million into the African continent, and you want to grow that into a significant business.
Well, I mean, today we do have a significant business, $250 million of revenue here in the whole continent of Africa. And here
you want to see it to $1 billion,
to $1 billion, so it's a multiple of 4, and we think this is eminently achievable. We've already started just a couple months ago with an announcement of an acquisition of MRI Seed, a white corn seed company in Zambia. Just this week over to Namibia, where Syngenta was granted observer status for the UNCCD, and we're engaging governments and stakeholders all around the continent. A lot of opportunity here.
Your strategy must be centered around the fact that 60% of the world's arable land lies on the African continent. That's got to be at the heart of your strategy.
Well, the heart of the strategy here in Africa is quite simply that the productivity of African farms is not very high, and depending on the crop, depending on the country, you're looking at 1.5 metric tons a hectare. You go to more places around the world that access to know-how and tools and technology are more available. It's not uncommon to have 10 metric tons a hectare. So the opportunity for productivity improvements are multiples of 3 or 4, depending on where you are. So that's the big opportunity.
Michael, you recently made a statement that some would say is counterintuitive to your overall strategy, and that is that you want farmers to produce more using less fertilizer. Now, that coming from one of the biggest fertilizer or chemical producers, pesticide producers globally, it seems to be a rather strange strategy.
Look, last week we made what we call our Syngenta commitments, and as we think about what the world is going to need over the coming several decades, as we move from 7 billion to 9 billion, of course these numbers are well known to many, and farmers have to be a big part of that, and sustainability is going to be a pretty competitive requirement. And for a company like mine, the pesticide industry, genetically modified seeds, commercial seeds, people are, and when we hear we want to be part of a sustainable agricultural economy, naturally people are a little bit suspicious. What does that mean? And I wanted to be the very first to say emphatically that means that we can grow more using fewer of the very inputs that we invent, and we're going to set ourselves out to do that. As a leader in this industry, who else would you expect to do it?
You took the position as CEO in 2008. What have been your biggest challenges to date?
Well, because first of all, it's a very competitive industry, but some of the biggest challenges have been how to sort of size the nature of the opportunity. When I became CEO, it was at the very time that agricultural commodities were rising rapidly, and as a consequence of that, food security came onto the national agendas of countries around the world. And so people were asking, what about this? What about food security, national self-determination on food? And we were often called upon to say, well, what does that mean, and what role can business play in that? So we've been in the limelight as a contributor to food security, and it's been great.
You've set a target of $24 billion on the revenue line by 2020. You're currently in 90 countries globally, 27,000 people in your employ. It's a big target. It's basically doubling your revenue. Is it achievable?
It's very achievable, and one of the things that helps people who might not understand our company very well is that underlying this ambition is an 8% compound annual growth rate between 2011 and 2020, and we achieved that. In fact, we exceeded 8% for the preceding 6 years until the time of that $25 billion goal by the end of the decade. So we really have to just continue to do in the future what we've done in the past, but of course every year the bar goes up slightly, but the world's ready for more productivity in agriculture.
You've had a relatively tough first half 2013, cooler weather in the northern hemisphere, and a number of other agricultural related issues that have been cited. You believe you're going to see that changing into the second half, 2013?
Well, look, every year growers have to confront Mother Nature. She's been a part of farming for 10,000 years, and 2013 was no exception. It was cold in the north, and both Western Europe as well as North America, two really big markets for us. Having said that, we've got 6% growth, and that is a reasonably strong market. Now, you ask about the second half. The second half increasingly is characterized by how are things going to go in Brazil, and we said that all the elements look set to have it be a strong second half. We planned for that, and so far so good. Here we are now in September. It's going well.
Interesting with your emerging marketplace. So South India is also a territory that you are exploring quite aggressively. When you compare the emerging markets, so Africa versus Brazil versus South India, Asia Pacific, what is your thought process? I mean, is there a territory that is more favorable than another in the emerging market fold?
Look, because we're in all of these countries, we have both the privilege but also the challenge
the
of being
headache.
in every single one of these countries, and they all have resource behind them. Each and every one of them have growth plans. They have different cropping patterns, and they have different nature of the competition is different in each one of them. But the productivity, where it lags the average, is where it's the biggest opportunity for us.
Where would that be?
Africa, exactly.
It is
India,
Africa.
India, Indonesia. I mean, many of these places where if you take a 10, 20-year look back, these smallholder growers mostly don't have great access to market, and those markets are developing now quite quickly.
If you can give us a little more on your expansion plans in South India, particularly over the next 12 to 24 months, you have stated that that expansion is going to be aggressive.
Well, in South India, the big crop there is rice, and it's rice where, for example, we just made an acquisition last year of DevGen. It's a Brussels-based firm that has technology in rice hybrid seed.
So automated crops.
Well, I didn't say automated. I mean, today, if you look at a rice grower in India, sometimes, automated means a grower that might have 2 or 3 hectares of rice has to make a phone call, which is automatic, but then they hire a planting crew, typically of women, who will come and install their crop by hand. Going forward, the opportunity exists to mechanize that plantation, by the way, as the availability of hand labor becomes both more expensive and scarcer. So there's huge opportunity for some more mechanization in rice in India, and Syngenta wants to be a part of that.
You also have been quite aggressive on acquisitions. Are you going to continue looking for appropriate targets in your space?
Last year was a record year for us for acquisitions. It was great, and the nature of acquisitions are they come when they come, and we do have an ambitious target for that each and every year. A good pipeline, but difficult to say how they're all going to and how and when they're going to materialize. 2013 does not look to be in a position to meet what we accomplished in 2012, but we've got a strong balance sheet and very interested.
Michael, talk to me about the Nigerian opportunity. You can't ignore 160 million consumers. That's got to form part of the Syngenta story.
It absolutely does, and I think that we're going to have other competition, of course, looking at that huge opportunity in front of us. The agricultural ministry is very enlightened. I think they've got a visionary leader who is really keen to see the agricultural productivity rise in Nigeria.
As in Minister Adesina.
Of course, and he's keen to invest in rice. And by the way, we have invested more in rice perhaps over the last couple of years than many crops, and the Nigerians eat a lot of rice. It's a staple crop, as you know, and our opportunity to help that productivity at a time when they're keen to do so is going to be a hand-in-glove fit. I think we opened up our office there just a couple months ago.
What kind of leader are you? Again, looking at the enormity of your portfolio, 90 countries, 27,000 people. How do you go about your day?
Well, look, the company, you're right to point out that it's big. Syngenta prides itself on being a team-based organization, and we organize ourselves first by crops, and crops are all around the world. So you do grow corn in Kenya, you grow corn in Indonesia, and of course you grow corn in the United States and France. So we organize by crop. We also organize by region, because you have to be very local, you know that, to galvanize and mobilize resources on the ground. And we have strong functions. By strong functions, I mean we have global platform to support all of this. So if you're an employee, you have to be able to be 100% committed to a number of different teams.
But it all feeds back to you at the end of the day.
Well, the company's a young company. We've got 10 years, we're 13 years old in November of this year, and we have very strong legacy. You date it all the way back. Syngenta legacy dates back to 1758, so I've inherited a terrific company, and it's a real privilege to serve them.
Your travelling requirements, again coming back to the geographic diversity of the group. What do you need to do? Typically, here I'm trying to get a little insight into perhaps your diary, saying, you know, how much time, here you are in South Africa, and you've recently just been to Namibia. And how do you manage your traveling diary?
And last week I was in the United States. And,
well, there you go.
A couple of weeks before that, Romania and Russia and in Germany. And look, I let some of the events compel me. By that I mean, as I mentioned a moment ago, Syngenta was granted observer status, which was great for the UNCCD in Namibia. And alongside that, of course, I would take the opportunity to visit South Africa. I'm headed up to Kenya, and from there over to Tanzania as well. So I try to pack these things together and extend it into a week and a half so that I can be productive. I tend to spend about 90 to 100 days a year visiting different parts of the world. It's terrific.
If you look at Africa and the current traction that you've got 5 years out, where do you see yourselves on the continent? In every single country?
Well, no, we've targeted 10 countries in addition to the Republic of South Africa, which is our largest. We're targeting Ghana, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Mozambique, the Ivory Coast, Nigeria, and Kenya. And the crops that we're targeting, vegetables, soybean, sugarcane, and rice, as well as corn. And why those countries and why those crops? Put simply, the crops that we've targeted are ones that do not require a great deal of processing. They are not predicated on having a huge amount of infrastructure invested, and they're able to be crops that can beneficiate the countries in which those farmers currently operate. So, you know, we're not having to bet a lot on the come to increase the productivity of those farmers. Why those countries? Those countries are the ones that today, first of all, have very promising agricultural sectors, and they have a growing and more prosperous middle class, and those will represent the buyers of this product.
News flow across the continent dominated at the moment by the terror attack in Kenya, very close to Tanzania. You mentioned you are on your way there. Does that impact your thought process when it comes to investing in the continent?
Not at all. I mean, I'll be in Nairobi on Friday, and you know, as an American living in Switzerland, I mean, all you have to do is pick up the newspapers to see, you know, that those sorts of terrorist attacks can happen anywhere. It's terrible, of course, and I feel very badly, of course, for the victims, and that some of the drama of that is still unfolding. But no, I mean, I think the worst thing we could possibly do is to let terrorist undertakings scare people out of making investments in these very promising places.
We're chatting to Michael Mack, the CEO of Syngenta. You're watching Captains of Industry here on CNBC Africa.